to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. I am very delighted to introduce you to my guest today, Mona Nahm. Mona and I have crossed paths a few times along this little journey of life here, and we'll talk about that in our discussion. But I'm so glad to get to sit down with her today and to have this opportunity to know her even better, because Mona is not only an incredible designer, but she is actually just a downright amazing human being. She was forced to grow up fast, but she has been able to take her experiences, both the good and the bad, and grow from them in remarkable ways. I won't give away her whole story, but like many guests on the podcast, Mona came to interior design as a second act, moving to New York City from the West Coast to attend the New York School of Interior Design in her 40s. She thought she wanted her own firm, and she still does, but fate took her down a different road. Today, Mona works for an architecture firm in San Francisco, designing affordable housing for some of our most vulnerable communities, looking into her own past and at her own family members to design spaces where others, she knows, can learn and feel like they can heal and rebuild their lives. She does it sustainably too, which furthers her commitment to creating a positive impact for both people and the planet. I'm moved by Mona's humility, her compassion, and her drive to create dignified, welcoming spaces for those in need. I can't wait for you to hear more of her incredible journey. Let's meet Mona. Hey, Mona, thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Hi, LuAnn. Thank you for having me.
You know, this is sort of crazy because the first time I met you, you were a student at New York School of Interior Design. I met you through a Zoom that my friend Shannon Letty, who's a professor there, was your professor. And Shannon invited me to come to your class virtually and speak with you guys. And then that was like right before LuAnn Live Virtual. And I was like, all of you should come to LuAnn Live. We'll give all the students a ticket. And so, but the thing was, you came, and a lot of your colleagues did as well, your fellow students. And I remember you speaking on the Zoom when I was like with all the Zoom cameras behind me, the TVs behind me. And after LuAnn Live, I must have gotten DMs, text messages, and emails. And they were like, get Mona on the show. I want to learn more about her.
I feel so privileged to be asked. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's like we asked you right away, and this is like 2 years later, for crying out loud. But I'm not even going to ask how that happened, because I'm just happy that you're here finally. And I also know that everything happens when it's supposed to happen. So, you know, I'm just excited. And shout out to Shannon Letty and to New York School of Interior Design. Here's the thing. So I knew a little bit about you, and I knew about the design, the type of design that you do, which is to specialize in affordable housing, which we're going to get to. And that was one of the big reasons why people were saying, have Mona on. Not only were they attracted to your just your kindness comes through when you speak. And I know that they were attracted to your person, but we have not had the discussion about affordable housing design on the show. And they were like, I want to learn more about that. So you did your intake form, and then I learned something else about you that I didn't know. And that was that you spent 8 months homeless as a teenager. And I thought, holy crow, like you don't run into that a whole lot You know what I mean? When you're
Yeah.
talking like about a podcast about interior design, I'm just going to say,
Yes.
right? So tell me about that, Mona. What was that and what was the impact? Talk to me a little bit about it.
It's such a long time ago now, but I feel like it it had such an impact to me that, when certain things happen to you, sometimes you run from it. And I think I ran from it for a long time. Everyone always asked me, why do you have so many degrees? And I think because I felt like I didn't get enough education when I was younger, and that chip on your shoulder of not ever feeling full. It's always there, and
Mm.
I think it attributes to that time in my life. I was a little after 16, maybe, and I had to leave home. And back then, there's no cell phones, there's no anything. And I became homeless. And I don't know if I understood what being homeless was back then either, because I was so young. But I started sleeping on the streets, and it was in Hollywood. I think the first night I slept was very close to Griffith Park. And I was pretty much sleeping on the streets for about 2 weeks, and I got really hungry one day and I had no more money left. And I walked to a restaurant that was a Thai restaurant, my mom's Thai. And I was looking for my mom like that whole time. I didn't know how to reach her. My mom had moved to Oregon. And at the time, she hasn't settled. So there's no cell phones, there's no social media, there's no internet. So I couldn't find her. You'd have to go to the old Yellow Pages book. And how do you get to an Oregon Yellow Pages book, and which city in Oregon, which seemed
Yeah, and you're in
huge.
LA.
I'm in LA. Yeah. So I went to a restaurant, and a young woman, a woman who was working there, she has a daughter a few years younger than me. And she came out and she says, "Is your name Mona?" And I was like, "Yes." And she said, "My mom knows your mom." And I was like so shocked. My mom used to own a restaurant, and her
I have
mother, I
goosebumps
know her
all
mother
over
had,
my body. I did not know this
I
before we
know.
went on air. Oh my God.
And my mom, she had worked for my mother when my mom owned a restaurant a long time before that. And she was like, come in, I'll feed you." And she fed me a big meal, and I just kept crying because I didn't know who to ask for help from. And I ended up sleeping at the floor of her kitchen. Um, and a few other couches when they needed some space for the next 8 months. And I called every single restaurant in Oregon because I knew that she was in Oregon. But I called every Thai restaurant, thinking my mother must be at a Thai restaurant working. And eventually I called the place and they said, "We don't have anyone by your mom's name, but I have a guest who sounds like she might be your mother. She comes to eat here once in a while, and she tells me about her daughter, and I think her name is Mona."
Oh my
And yeah,
God, you
so
can't make this up, Mona.
no, and then a few months, maybe a few weeks later, the phone rang at the house. I picked up and it was my mom, and that's how I end up reuniting with my mother. It
I,
was
I I'm flabbergasted. Like you saved the best for the show. I mean, part of me is like, thank you. Holy
it
cannoli.
was hard.
That's insane. I mean, you're not in like a small town in middle America where there's one Thai restaurant and 2,000 people. You're in Los Angeles. You're in Hollywood. Like I'm hearing Pretty Woman. This is Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like I'm hearing like like there must be 100 Thai
Yeah.
restaurants. Like that is beyond my comprehension. That is just nuts.
And
That is just nuts.
I feel like the craziest part was when I did reunite with my mom. My mom has always had a hard time with what's been happening with our family, the loss of wealth, the loss of work. She lost her business. Um, and my mom couldn't handle the stress. And so when I
Mm.
finally got together with my mom, I really thought, oh, I can go back to school now, get it
I can be a
re-enrolled. I
kid.
can be a
She's
kid
going to
again.
take care
Yeah,
of me.
exactly. But she was not okay. And because of that, it ended up that I ended up becoming my mom's caretaker. And I ended up staying home. I worked full time, and I never went back to school. And my trips took me more. My opportunities took me many more places, but I
Oh
ended
my
up traveling
gosh.
for a bit, taking on jobs. But it was I was 26 when I decided that I needed some form of education to to grow up.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, that's amazing. I mean, it sounds like when I hear it, it's almost like, well, would she have left if she could take care of you, right? Like, I don't know all that details, but it's almost like, well, of course, right? And so, you know, ugh, gosh, that's crazy. And there's another just a weird technical question in there. Like, when you just stopped going to high school, nobody came looking for you? Like, that's just it? One
I
less
don't
kid,
know.
whatever? I
It was
mean,
like I was at a magnet school and I was in the first semester of the 10th grade, and that's when I left. And I don't know, it was in Van Nuys, and I
you just that's it.
that's it.
Later, I'm out.
Yeah. A few people I've met up with over the years who had somewhat knew me back then, they were all very shocked about what happened to me. They didn't know. Apparently,
You were just gone.
I
It
was just
never occurred
gone.
to them that you were homeless. They just figured
I was
maybe
just
whatever.
gone.
They just didn't finish the sentence for themselves. Holy crow. I mean, that's insane. That's an
Oh
insane
no,
story.
I think
So
we.
here's the thing.
Mhm,
So you are, sophomore in high school,
mhm.
you leave, no more education, and you go through this journey and you find your mom and now you're caretaking for her. And it sounds like you've got different types of work and jobs that are sometimes stationary, sometimes traveling. And at 26, you're like, I got to do geometry. Like, I got to get a high school education.
It it was a when I was like 20, I was waiting tables at a restaurant. Oh, 19, I was waiting tables, and a man came in and he said, he came with his family, and he looked like a really nice guy, and he said, you're kind of pretty, if you came to Thailand, you might be able to like be an actress. And the crazy part is back then it was just becoming acceptable for half Thais can be in the industry as a performer, because back then there wasn't any. It was a very homogenous society. And I went back. I saved all the money. I told my mom, here's $200. I paid the rent. If I'm not famous in 2 weeks, I'll be back. And I didn't know. All I wanted was to be rich. All I wanted. I didn't know what it meant to do what I was gonna do. So I save all my money and I go to Thailand. And I sit in this guy's office waiting for him for like 5 hours. And when he finally came out, he says, "Who are you?" And I was like, "I'm that
Oh,
waitress." And it took a little convincing that I had really made an effort to get here and I wasn't crazy. And he called his wife, who was a casting director. And like less than a week later, I was on a TV soap opera. And so that path took me away from school for a little bit longer. I know it's kind of a
you can't make this up. I had no idea this was going in this direction. I
yeah.
think we need wine for this interview, Mona. I totally think we need wine for this.
It was a crazy time. Like when I think about it now, I don't think about me. I feel like I'm
Right,
watching a
it's like this
movie to
other
myself. Yes,
person, right? And
absolutely.
so how long do you stay? Like,
Six
so
years.
it's not a Spanish novella, it's not a
Yeah.
telenova. What is it over there in Thailand? Right, right? Like
Then there's no internet, right? So if
Days of Our
yeah,
Lives in
yeah,
Thailand.
but they end like 3 months and they finish 3 months. So they're like episodic and they end.
Okay.
So I was on a show and I had acted for about 3, 4 years, and I got a job one day to be a translator on an American movie, and it was called Bloodsport 2. Bloodsport 1 was with Van Damme. Bloodsport 2
Wow.
was with a different actor, and it was shot in Thailand, and they needed someone who'd be a translator. And I didn't know anything more than at this point, no one knows I didn't go to high school. No one knows my history. No one can't search about me. They don't know anything about me, but I can speak English.
You're Queen of
Yeah,
Sheba for all
right.
they
Yes.
know. Whatever.
So
I'm a I'm an actress by via
right.
Hollywood to Thailand.
Right. And then I was high on this like all I was just doing is sending money home and hoping that things are going to get better. And I ended up translating on this film set and fell in love with the job. Not with the acting. I hated the acting, but I loved coordinating and working with film. So through that experience, I met more filmmakers, and not actor side, but people who really studied
Production
abroad.
side.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I became really good friends with a few people, and they started talking about, Steven Spielberg and Alfred Hitchcock and Stanley Kubrick. And I'm like, who are these people? And I realized I have no education. I don't
Oh,
actually, I didn't
whoa.
learn anything the right way. I just know that if you tell me
You're
you
just
have,
scrappy.
I'm scrappy. You tell me you've got 50 people coming to lunch and I need to figure out how to feed these 50 people, I can do it. I can do it
I
without
get
a
it done.
degree, I can do anything. So I can do it. So I had climbed this ladder and with a bit with no net at the bottom. And
Right.
at 26, I was just sitting around. I had just turned 26, and I said, I can't go through life feeling like a fraud, where I have to
Yeah.
pretend that I come from a good family and things were good in my life. I needed to actually build something for myself. And so I went
Wow.
to Torrance Hamilton Adult School when I was 26 and got my GED.
That's incredible. I mean, it's so funny because, my God, first of all, my brain is going in 16,000 directions. Okay. Um, but when I think about that moment, here you are, you're doing work, you're respected by multiple professionals at this level. And it's the weird little conversations that are like, wait, what? And it's like, even if I, if somebody's going to say to me, oh, well, like that dissertation that Tolstoy did. Like, I don't have any idea, but I'm like, okay, he's a Russian guy. Like, I know who he is. He was popular. He wrote a lot of stuff. He's a philosopher. Like, I have some bearing on it. And it's because probably somewhere in high school, there was something I didn't quite pay all the way attention to, but I got enough to stand there and have a halfway conversation about it. And you don't think about missing that slice, right? Like not having like been made to read Gatsby or Catcher in the Rye or,
Absolutely.
you know,
Mhm.
or even just sitting around and watching Jaws and knowing that Spielberg, like you didn't spend your high school years, going out with friends and going to movies. You were trying to survive.
Right.
Like it's funny how that is a very like I can cognitively see how you don't need it obviously to be successful, but that comfort level of what is everybody talking about? It's kind of like when people are all talking about finance around me. I'm like, whatever. Okay. Like, we're just going to make money and then we're going to like put it in the bank and we're going to figure it out and we're going to make sure there's enough at the end, right? Like, let's keep going. Right?
Absolutely. And I think that when I came back to school, I was like, from getting the GED, I got to El Camino College. And at El Camino, you have to pass, even with the GED, you have to do like a math exam and an English exam. And I was 2 levels below average levels for, I have a master's in writing now. So it's kind of like such a far path, right? But like at that time, it was like, oh God, I couldn't think. I couldn't do. I didn't, you don't learn about US history till the 11th grade in high school back
Right.
then. So I
Right.
didn't know what
That's
an
what I'm saying. These
electoral
little
college is. Yeah.
conversations. Yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't know any of this. I felt like I was just a really w- ill-informed human and who
That's
was really
crazy.
scrappy and knew how to work, knew that if someone said to me, this is the menu you're to memorize, you can memorize it, even if I didn't know
Mm.
what you know the food really is, or I didn't know what the different types of
Yes.
cheeses are. I just have to know
Right.
what it might be to someone else who eats it.
Right, right. What it looks like, how much it costs, and if you want it or not, right? It's
Exactly.
like what's interesting is when you first said in the beginning, and I wrote it down, s- went after so many degrees to fill the void of not completing high school. You know, it's funny because I heard one thing in my head, and I through this next part of this conversation, I've learned the actual of it because I did not go to college. And, I was super smart in school, like ridiculous. Honor society, Spanish honor society. There's no reason I shouldn't have been in college, but I couldn't hack it. The school I went to was, first of all, I'm very like, if I write it, I've learned it. Like people say to me all the time, like, how do you remember things on the podcast? I'm like, well, because I'm literally 110% here speaking with you and I'm writing the whole time you're talking. So for me, that's it. It's a done deal. I got this. Right. But the thing was that when I went to go to college, well, they're not going to feed it all to you week by week. They're going to say, I'll talk about this conversation. You go read 5 chapters. And I was like, no,
you kind of talk it to me, and that's how I get it. That's how I learn. You talk it to me, and I get it. And so I wasn't able to hack it in college when I was young, before I had this understanding of what my gap was. Now I could do it. And I ended up doing it for a time when I was an adult. And I was like, oh, you actually can do this. You don't need to do it. And then it was like, okay. But the thing is, I think I've often not really understood the value of even just that level of high school where, you know what, I might not be able to sit there and do a speech on the electoral college, but I know what it is, right? It's like that's a huge gap. And it's no wonder you have sought to be so educated
Yeah.
now, right? It's like an overcorrection,
Yes.
but then also probably, it's funny because you just nodded to overcorrection, right? But also probably you're a great student. You're a smart lady. You probably would have enjoyed it if you had been able to be in high school. How about that, right?
I would have loved it. I love
Yeah.
school. And I still do, which is kind of why, and I'm probably the only sibling who went to college fully and stayed in college. But my not everyone likes school, and it's okay. There are so many paths. Yeah, there's so many paths. My sister makes more money than I do, and she never went a day in college. Well, she did a few days, but she didn't like college at all. She just didn't. But she is so amazing and so smart, whip smart. She's street smart. I mean, like I
Yeah.
survived in the street, I think, because I was earnestly afraid of everything, and I never,
Yeah.
did anything because out of fear.
Ah.
I was one of
Ah.
those who were like, oh, this is really scary, and I befriended
Oh.
every person on the street. I have to walk from one street to another area to go to work, and I knew every prostitute, drug dealer, I know
Wow.
weapons dealer along the way, and they all liked me because I was a 16-year-old kid who would bring leftover foods from the restaurant and feed everyone along
Mhm.
the way.
Oh
And
my goodness.
because I didn't see evil the way I just saw up like people with or without opportunities,
Yeah.
and I was one of the ones
Interesting.
without. And
And yeah.
I didn't see the world the same way, I guess. But if you put me on the street right now, I would die. I don't think I survive it.
So here we are, like all of that impacts where you are now.
Yeah.
So, multiple degrees. um,
I worked in film for a long time. And then in 2016, I started like not wanting to be in film as much anymore. I felt like there is a distance from what I was designing for a movie set to the user or whoever. Like, I never know who gets to see this thing. And does it
mm,
really even matter? I started doubting everything I did. And what I really wanted to do was I wanted to impact the user. I wanted to design in a way that it helps lives. And I didn't know what that meant. I just knew
mm,
that I was, making independent films left and right wasn't changing my life or changing anyone's life who's watching it. How do I get to a place where I could do something and impact someone and have a direct impact? And I was talking to my husband a lot at the time. I'd finally met a really good man and married him, all
oh,
that. We'll skip all that, but he's a really good guy. And he
that's
and
awesome.
he said like, you love design. You've always been designing movie sets, and why don't you look into interior design? And it just seemed so daunting to me. Like I
Mhm.
wasn't trained as an artist. I wasn't, I became a set designer by building movie sets. I went through the carpentry route. So there was this fear of mine that, oh no, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to be the dumbest person in the class and I'm not going to know
Mm,
anything. And I don't use software very well. I didn't grow up with a computer and all these things. And he said, all it sounds like are just a bunch of reasons for you to overcome, instead of reasons for you to be
not
running the other
do it.
way. So,
Oh my goodness. Well, he
yeah.
knows you and he
Yeah.
sleeps with one eye open too. I'm going
Um,
to tell you right now.
and so I moved to New York, went to NICED, and my whole life changed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And so the two of you moved to New York together
Yes, yes.
and you
Hmm.
did it to go to NICET. It
Yes.
wasn't like, oh, whoa. That's some devotion to you
Yeah.
and to what he had a belief in you.
Yeah. And I wanted to
Wow.
go to one of the oldest cities in the United States where it's the birth of interior design. I wanted to learn about the history. And there were so many options. I could have probably gone to a lot of other schools because I had a
Sure.
bachelor's, but I chose NYSID specifically because I went through every single curriculum and I compared them. And I felt like NYSID had the most robust curriculum at the time for me to get out and start working. And that's what I
Mm.
wanted. I wanted to just go to school. And at that point, I had a master's already too from a different field in film. And so I thought at that point, I have a master's from UCLA and an undergrad from Loyola Marymount, LMU, and they're both famous film schools. And
Oh my God.
and I had this pedigree that was great, right? And then I got to NICET and they rejected my portfolio. They're like, you can't use it because it's not a one person portfolio, it's a movie, right? I need like 40 people to make the scenes happen. so, so I ended
Oh.
up going back to the rudimentary, going back to the basics, started hand sketching, creating, and had to find the will to be me to be a beginner again. And at the time I was already in my 40s, so it was it was pretty
Wow.
crazy. It was a crazy
That
ride.
is that is crazy. That is absolutely insane.
Changed my whole life though. I mean,
Yeah,
the things
right?
I learned,
Right?
every single class. I think I remember being in Shannon's class. She's one of my early studios, and Shannon was like, today you're presenting, so no ums, no uhs, no things that are not even related to my project. But she was so strict about
She's so
presentation. She
dedicated. I
is
mean,
an
come on.
amazing
Isn't
teacher.
she like one of the most amazing humans you've
Amazing.
ever met?
Yes.
And then add her dedication as a teacher. It's insane,
And and
right?
and you know when you look at it, it's all the things in between the lines that she was trying to
Yes.
teach that made, help. And I had, Ellen Fisher, who's the dean of the school, and
Oh,
she was such a champion for me. And so was my teacher, Barbara. And I definitely feel that all my peers, I mean, I was around some really talented people, and I remember thinking when COVID hit, like, really? Like, I'm graduating and this is it. I did all that to not know what's going to happen with my life. And
yeah.
and I went back to school thinking I was going to start a firm. That there was no thought of being an employee. I was
Mm.
older. This was going to pivot and change, and I was going to own my own design firm, and I was going to find a niche that overlaps film and television and interiors. I had all these dreams, and then COVID hit, and then we,
Movies are closed down, all the
yeah, I
things.
was employed the entire time, which was so amazing, and most people weren't, and I
Yeah.
helped a lot of people who were not. Um, but I ended up getting this job offer in San Francisco, and I was like, why not? I was interning in healthcare at the time at Perkins Eastman, and I loved my job. I loved healthcare, but it was just a hard time to stay employed in a big firm when they were laying so many people off. And
Mhm.
so I went to a smaller firm, and they YA studio in San Francisco, and Yaku Askew
Mm.
and Martin Paquin are the owners. And Yaku Askew, why he had known my husband back since when my husband was still a student. So he was gracious enough to say that, why don't you both come? He had no idea what I could offer at the time. And
Wow.
Martine has like a sister company, and Martine does the all the interior design. So I kind of fell into step with working with both of them. And it's almost 4 years now that I've been there, and I spend 90% of my time on the affordable housing side, and I love it. And I'm finally seeing the two buildings I worked on from day one getting built. I'm in CA right now, and in a very short time, when this building gets built, I have to sit and think about all those dreams I had when I switched my career, and if I was ready to just do it. Because a year ago, I started taking small projects, and I thought maybe in a year and a half, I'll be there.
Mm. So, all right. Now, first of all, I just want to go back and do it a little bit more love on NICET because I agree. And I mean, Ellen and Shannon and all the people there are so amazing. And I have collaborated with them a lot of times, like visiting the different classes virtually and in real life and stuff. And I just, I can hear in you, the extra that you got there, right? You got the education, but you got that extra. And I just wanted to take 2 seconds to acknowledge that. But now you move on and it's COVID, and the two of you get this opportunity to go back to the West Coast. And your husband's just like, is he just the greatest guy on the planet? And he's like, hey, whatever you need, Mona, like, let's just do it.
I I got lucky there. That was my
That's
mom. My
awesome.
mom says that's my lottery in life. She said, of
Oh.
all the things that could have gone that might have been very challenging, I've landed one of the kindest human who is just super supportive. And I don't know, I think that he sees what I want to give back to the world, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
or he
Mm-hmm.
encourages it too, and he always tells me to not be afraid,
Mm.
and I got really lucky in that sense.
Well, and the thing about it is that that many who had the path that you had, it's so much more common that it's a series of really bad relationships along the way, because
Yeah.
it's that lack of what the circumstances that you were in can create that lack of worth and that lack of esteem, and so therefore you don't value yourself, and then therefore you don't come to a relationship where you expect to be valued. And guess what, when we don't come to a relationship expecting to be valued, we're not. And so I think it just also really speaks to probably what it was at LuAnn Live virtually, that people just were attracted to you. Like, there is this part of you that, regardless of all of the crazy, good, bad, and ugly that's happened, that you're a very centered person. Like, you have this inner core of who you are that comes out. I don't know.
Oh,
It just
thank
is
you.
interesting.
I have a lot of optimism. I
Yeah.
I broke both my wrists in December, and I'm now in a brace, and it's going to be
Yeah.
off in a couple weeks. And the other hand is pretty much okay. This one only the thumb broke, so
How did you
um,
do that? You
roller
nut.
skating.
Oh my God.
Don't go
With
roller
a
skating. It's
lollipop
so
in your
risky.
mouth,
Yeah.
probably, right? Like, and a balloon in the other hand. This is what I do.
Uh, I
You're a nut.
I should not have gone, but it's okay. I was trying to participate. It was my sister's birthday. I was coming off the rink. I had skated successfully for an hour and 45 minutes before I fell.
That is so, oh my,
It
that had
was
to
bad.
be really like, you've
It
got to be
was.
kidding me.
It was hard, but it also, I think, like really made me slow down in a way and think, and I've
How
been
did you
able to
do your
work.
design work
Oh,
without
left-handed.
your hands?
I have been left-handed for the last 6 weeks. So yeah,
Oh my
it was winter break,
God.
so that was kind of helpful. And
Okay.
I don't know. I lost track also of why I said that, but I was just
Well,
you said something about
I
being
cut you off
centered.
because I was like, wait a minute, how did you work? But you were saying how it created space for you to slow down and to,
Yeah. And to
you
think,
know,
I'm studying for my AREs because I've always had this dream. I wanted to be an interior and an architect. I just wanted to do both. I wanted to build a house and decorate the house. I
brain
wanted to do
surgeon
everything.
is next.
Right. So I've been collecting my hours since I was at NYSID because that was another thing. There were a lot of people at NYSID who were dual degrees and who were both architect and interior. And I thought, like, there's just a total path for this. We can be both. There's no reason
Wow.
architects want to study interiors. So I've been collecting my hours, and I had studied so hard before I broke my both my wrists that I was like, I'm just gonna go take the exam. I already scheduled it both in December, and I was like, I'm just gonna take the exam, whatever. I mean, I have three fingers. It's just click, right? It's like ABCs. I can read. I should be okay. And I passed both of my first two exams.
Oh my God.
And everyone is shocked. And I said, I didn't study a day after I fell because I had nothing in me to study. But
Right.
it's all up here. And my interior design education, I studied and I've taken all my certifications and NCIDQ. And there's so much overlap that I just kind of walked in there and was able to do it.
Well, you see, that is because along the way you were actually learning the things, as opposed to being there to just get the degree or to get the grade
Yeah.
and get out of that class. There's a
Yeah.
difference. Believe me, I know the difference. I've done both. Right? And because I think of you coming to it as an adult, right? Like that's like what I was sharing with you before. It's like I finally did go back to college in my, like, I don't know, maybe 31, 30, whatever. And for me, it was enough to prove that I could do it. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, okay. So I just did this for 2 years, took one or two classes a semester while having the kids and the business and everything. And I got an A in every class. So it didn't tap into me. Okay, I need to finish this. It just said to me, okay, you could do it. You don't need to prove it to yourself.
Absolutely.
But when you are enjoying it the way you have and the way you have gone from one area of education to another, it's what I'm hearing is you've actually learned it along the way, not just completed it.
And I
Yeah.
love it. I
Yeah.
the minute I recently started teaching at UNLV, and it's an in-person school. Now I've taught at NYSID. I've gone back to teach online classes because
I
they're
love
they're
it.
in New York, and I just love Ellen so much and the program
I
so much.
know.
And I finally did this, UNLV. I started teaching production design because there is an overlap between architecture, interior design, and production design. Movie sets don't come from a lot of famous film designers have interior and architecture degrees. So it's kind of like a melding of things I love. I love to teach it. So I went to school and I was like, I need a PhD. I need to come back. Not even for the PhD. Maybe just a different degree. I just want to be back in school. And and after the first day of class, the first day of orientation, I spoke to the staff and everything. I went home to my sister. I said, "Oh my God, I totally found the place I belong. This is so great." Like it felt like I was coming home to something that I love. And then after the first day of class, she picked me up and I said, "Oh yeah, it's not the same. I am an outsider. I am not their friends. I'm gonna have to give them a grade."
All right. This isn't me and all my
I,
colleagues striving to do good. This is me having to tell you, you did phone it in,
yes.
sweetie, and I can't pass you.
And I was so scared. I was like, oh, right after class, all of them grouped together, the friends, and they're all chatting. And then you're like, ooh, yeah, no, I'm not in the in crowd. No,
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 they didn't
I'm a
invite
teacher
you
now.
over.
It's time
But
to change
to
the
the point
role.
of Shannon, I feel like Shannon does that. I've only witnessed her a dozen or so times, but I feel like she does that line pretty good of teacher and friend.
Yes.
Am I mistaken?
No,
Like
not
I
at
feel
all.
that's what comes through to
Mhm.
me,
And
that she's not going to sugarcoat it and she's not going to not have high expectations, but I feel like she creates friendships with her students,
she does, and I think it comes from
right?
respect.
Yeah.
Like we respect that she is going to be honest. And
Yeah.
that's the most you can ask for. And ever since
Mhm.
I left, she and I are Instagram friends, and she loves you too. Like it's her love of her life. And for my anniversary, we got to go see you too, and we couldn't stop chatting about it. She's she loves it. But she wasn't my friend when I was her student. She
Right,
became my
right, right, right.
friend after I'm done with her class. And I
Right,
just
this is true.
had a lot of admiration for, you know, all the teachers out there
Yeah.
who go to bat for their students and write those letter of recommendations, because that
Oh,
is so much time.
oh
And
my goodness,
I admire
right?
them so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So here's the thing. I literally could keep asking you questions about this, but I do want to spend time on the type of design work that you do now. I mean, we have not had this conversation on the podcast before, the nuances of affordable housing design and your passion for it. So set the stage for that now, Mona.
Okay, so here I am. I am in San Francisco and I'm working for a firm that focuses on affordable housing. And my first project because it's still going right now, is a 98 unit senior housing in the inner Richmond area. And 20 units, I think, are dedicated to um, senior veterans and also
Mm,
formerly homeless veterans. And it's
mm,
a building for people with multiple and severe disabilities. So there's a lot of support for the senior community in that area. And I was so fresh out of school, My boss said to me at the time, Yaku said, Mona, why don't you do a study of the interior? And I just went to town. I spent like 3 days not talking to anyone and designed all these crazy thoughts I had about how biophilia should come in and help this design. And I think it was like surprising everyone was like how much I was able to create in a short time. And I realized I was designing for my mother and my uncle and my dad and people that I'm designing for people who are really getting very old and not able to maybe find the fullest joy in life, and or maybe just beginning to have a roof over their head again. And I kept thinking
Mm,
about what does this really mean? And I think for the first time, that's what I was hunting. I was looking for,
mm,
from film, I was looking for this immediate impact that I knew when this building gets built, there's going to be 98 people or families in this building, and
mm,
they're going to get to experience these decisions that we make today. Like almost the building insulation is 90% formaldehyde free. Like we're we're picking products that have no phthalates and no and these were all sustainability things that I was very much influenced when I was a student, and I went on to keep studying. I am lead AP, I'm also a well AP, and I do living future. And I I just really believe that the population that we're designing for, sometimes the supportive housing portion of an affordable housing, a lot of affordable housing have a supportive housing section to it, like 10 units are dedicated or
mm-hmm.
something. And I realized that when you don't have a roof over your head, and actually, before I say that, let me back up 1 second. Of all the things I would have wanted to design, I never ever thought I would go into affordable housing. I
Right,
I
right.
couldn't imagine it. It was like me going back to where I was, and I had struggled so far to forget that girl who didn't have a place to sleep and was picking food out of a trash can, and my first night homeless, a very big black man came up to me, and I was so scared of him. And he said, "Is that all you've got to sleep in tonight?" And I just had my
Oh,
clothes on my back. And he says, "You're going to freeze. I know it doesn't
oh.
seem cold, but you're going to freeze." And then he gave me a bunch of newspapers. And I was like, well, "What is this for?" And he says, "It's
He's
called
like, that's your
insulation."
blanket.
You know,
That's your blanket,
yeah.
sweetie.
So and I was like, "What does that mean?" And he said, "Just shove it in your shirt. Just shove yourself with all that newspaper." And so I did. And that's how I slept the first night out on the streets.
How
And
about him?
yeah, right, amazing. And
Right?
I I learned very quickly that there are people out there who would help you if you,
Mm,
and there are people to avoid. But
right.
because of that, I couldn't imagine doing a job. I mean, my internship at NYSIT, I interned at Avroco, I interned at Perkins Eastman, I interned at Ramza, Robert A.M. Stern Architects. We were
Mm,
designing the most expensive apartments, in the country. And then I got to affordable housing where materials are spare, but very selected, and the population of the people that I'm designing for. And I realize now it's like the mirror that I'm looking at, that I'm afraid to look at, is not really a mirror. It's more of like a window to a memory, almost, of like, this
mm,
happened to me, and there are opportunities that we can help give so someone else can get out too. And I started to think more and more in that direction. And as we did community meetings, and people come to the meetings and they'll ask like, um, "Is there going to be hot water in every unit?" And then you're just
oh,
like,
oh,
like, "I'm in a wheelchair. Can I get to the bathtub? Am I going to be able
oh,
to get a shower?" The
yeah.
questions are also unique, and
And they're so literally tied to surviving. Like
yes,
nothing is taken for granted. To think
yeah,
you have to ask, would there be hot water? Obviously, you've done many days,
yeah.
weeks, nights without it. So it's not a given,
Yeah. Will I
right?
have a stove? Is there a
Mm,
refrigerator? Will I have a freezer? The questions were all very basic, and you realize that the people who are hoping to come live here are looking for the basic things, and they actually don't know to ask those bigger questions. And when I say bigger, I don't mean bigger in life needs, but bigger as in like, what is the construction material of this building?
Yes. Are you putting me in an environment that's going to off gas and you're giving me the cheapest stuff? So therefore it's going to impact my health. Like they're like, I'll take one roof, please,
Yes.
and one refrigerator and one bathtub. I'm good.
Yes.
Right. And so you're tapping into that, making sure that the things that would never occur to them to ask for are part of that.
Yes. And that,
Interesting.
they're going to get a building that's healthy, and that through that healthiness of the building, that maybe their mind will get cleared up and they'll feel safety,
Mm,
and give them that. I couldn't have gotten where I was if I didn't meet that one family that let me sleep on their floor and I felt safe. The minute I felt safe, I was able to go out and shower. And the first thing I did was I went to look for a job. And I went out and I got minimum wage job, and I worked at a place called Chicken Delight on Hollywood Boulevard, and I fried chicken. And I just I did whatever I could, but I couldn't have done that if I smelled horrible and I had no no
yes.
place to put my head, and I couldn't
That's right.
convince anyone that I was going to be a great hire when.
That you'd show up the next day,
Yeah,
that you were worth the
exactly.
shot.
The stability of having a roof over your head gives you the opportunity to have the stability to get the job, and then the
Mhm.
stability to save money and get yourself out. And I think it all comes from, first, that safety, a place for them to have a home. And as our job as designers, I mean, there is no greater reward than to know that everything that you're focusing on, and you're spending the time to check between two products, or you're deciding between materials. There is no greater joy than that when you do it, it's going to get built and it's going to help a lot of people. And
Mm,
I love that. I
that's
cannot
amazing.
imagine. I told you I started my little firm and I started doing small jobs, and all I could think about is, how do I get a big job? Because I still want to do affordable housing, but I'm just not there yet.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
will one day. I will one day.
Yes. Yeah, it's so incredible because like your line of looking in the mirror, right? Like and now it's looking in a window rather than a mirror. Um how much more you could meet another designer that has compassion, that has empathy, that has a desire to serve this community. But how much more you bring to it when you're literally designing, imagining yourself, imagining your mother, imagining your uncle, like you said, like what really is important. Because, yes, the focus groups and the community meetings, but I think that I could see somebody that had a simple desire to do well, which is, by the way, admirable. like lots,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Um, but hearing that question and maybe being like, that's silly. Of course there's a stove. That's silly. Of course there's, but not that they would respond that way, but not taking to heart the depth of what it means to not make an assumption that there's going to be much more than a roof and that these other things shouldn't be taken for granted. And I just think that um, it just must impact the way you do this at such a level that brings so much more meaning to the end product, and not just to you and the value of you to the firm that you're working with, but to that end product.
absolutely. The reward, the feeling of, like, and I'm not a saint. I'm not. I'm
No, you're
everyone.
human, right?
I get
Yeah.
paid. It's not. I'm not a
Yes.
nonprofit. I get paid. I take the bill and I take the money, and I try to take care of the people I love.
Right.
But at the same time, like, to be able to wake up every day and know that if today is going to go a little longer, it's going to be okay, because it's it's going to help someone else. It's going to help the people that could have been me. And and I think it's really hard when you go to speak at some of these places, and sometimes there's a lot of um, fear, and they don't want an affordable housing built near them because they don't
Hmm.
understand what affordable housing is. Like,
Hmm.
almost all people in affordable housing are through referrals. It's they are already working with a social worker and are already
Mm,
working to get themselves back on their feet so they can be eligible for opportunities like this. So it's not
mm-hmm.
a free for all. It's not like anyone can come live in an affordable housing. You go through an entire process, and only a small portion of the units are given through lottery. There's priorities to age, priorities to people who already live in the same community but got forced out because they couldn't afford to live
Mm,
there anymore. And most affordable housing is seniors. It's
mm.
that whatever they saved back, in the 80s, when people didn't realize how long they were going to live,
Right,
and
right, right.
and there are people now who are 80 or 90 who retired at 65 and completely have no way to support themselves because
I
everyone they loved, they've outlived.
know.
And now they're on the streets. And
Yeah, and if you don't have the family network, right?
mhm,
Like I think about my dad, he passed away 5 years ago, but he would have been in that boat
yeah,
except that he lived with my brother,
mhm,
right? And so together, him and my brother and his wife and his child, they like it was the combining of the incomes, right? But if my dad had to do it on his own, he would have needed like an affordable housing type thing.
yeah,
Regular guy, just had his own businesses his entire life. Just nobody ever said, "Hey, start a mutual fund." Like nobody said that to him back like in 1950. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
and he was self-employed, so there's no pension. And it's
Yeah,
like, and he always just lived hand to mouth,
yeah,
so there was no savings
mhm,
either. You know what I mean?
absolutely.
And
It's
it's just like,
prime example.
all I'm saying is it doesn't always have to come from bad circumstances. It can just be, to your point,
Yeah,
the circumstances of where you're at, right?
yeah. I work in San Jose a lot, and in San Jose, the population of African Americans in San Jose is only like 4% now, I think, around there. But 50% of
Mm.
people who are homeless in San Jose are almost 50% is African American.
See,
There's just
that's
there's no
insane.
community to support them, and so it falls, and it's a mirror to every big city that's going it's not going to stop at the big city. You could be in a rural city and then you see some aunt, or a mother of someone who had gone to grief because they lost their children and now they've lost their home. I think everyone is only a few paychecks from losing everything, and if we can't find the empathy and see that, we're really we really are
Yeah,
cruel.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and I'm not saying everyone is deserving of every opportunity. I'm not saying
No,
that,
no, no,
right?
no, no,
But
no.
if
But I mean, a statistic like that, that's like, how do you run a city and ignore a statistic like that? That's just,
right,
to me, like, the only thing I can hear in my head is stunad. That's stunad. I'm sorry. You know
yeah,
what I mean? It's like 4% of the population is from a specific culture. So in this case, you're saying African American, but it could be anything.
yeah,
But 50% of the population at need in that city is from that one
yeah.
4%. Like, I'm sorry. Like, no, that's illogical. That is the people running the community ignoring what's in front
They
of
are
their
working
eyes.
so hard, and they, within their own community. My firm is working on the African American cultural center for San
Mm,
Jose, and they're raising money for it right
good.
now. And it is a cultural center, but it is affordable housing component. And
Mm,
the cultural center portion, there's going to be a clinic, there's going to be mental services, healthcare,
wow.
supportive. There's going to be a theater to celebrate each other,
Oh,
and
yeah.
a small museum. There's all these aspirations,
Yeah, because
and
you
so
gotta get the hope going
yeah,
and the opportunities for enjoyment so that you can aspire to do the next thing, right? I
yeah.
mean, whatever next thing is, even if it's just going, waking up the next day,
And
right?
my
Like, why?
and my job on this project was really different. I didn't have to do design, but they told me that they needed someone to kind of interview the community and come up with like a proposal for all of these stakeholders. Like, how are they going to share the space? Like the museum person, how much space does he need? The theater
Mm,
person, what do they need? The clinic portion, what do they need? And so I surveyed and I interviewed local they're like local heroes to their community, throughout, and talk to them. And what I learned is that when they're from that community, almost all of them, they're not implants. They're people that grew up
Yeah.
in San Jose, spent
And they want it
generations, and
better.
have been forced out of their homes or not doing
Oh,
well. And I was just like saying that, when there's opposition, I was like, you're not opposing aliens. You're opposing people that probably grew up with your grandparents and they were
mm,
okay that back then. So
yes.
I don't know. I know that it's a difficult subject, but before saying no, I think we have to think about what does it really mean and do ourselves an opportunity to really learn about it and get educated about it and see what it means to not do anything. Because
Mm,
it's either we do it or we don't, right? If you put
that's
in
right.
yeah, if you put in affordable housing in the middle of nowhere because you think that's where they belong, or you think that that's safer for you because you're so far away, that's no different than what we did in the 50s or whatever, right? We the
Right.
30s when we had the New Deal, we pushed a group of people which are now made up of every color. And there are whites, there are Hispanics, there are Asian,
Yes.
there are blacks, there are everything, and you put them out there with no resources around them to grow from. There's no job opportunities, there's no transportation to get them to places, there's not enough grocery stores, there's not enough after school opportunities, there's no nurseries. All of this comes back to like the only way to help people up, it's almost like they need the network to help them,
Yes.
you know?
You need the village. You need the village. I mean, and the thing is, you can't pat yourself on the back that you built a building and then plopped them in the middle of nowhere and didn't give all of those support services, like you said, because it's about building a life,
Yeah,
right? It's like
yeah,
giving somebody an opportunity to build their life and then for them to build the next generation of their family's lives,
yes.
right?
I think policy is next for me, somewhere down the
Yeah.
line.
Yeah, I
I
know,
know.
right?
Somewhere
Right?
down the
You
line, I gotta get into
Oh, I
policy.
can see it too. I can see it too. You're going to need a couple of lifetimes on this planet, Mona, because you have a lot to do for us. I'm
Ah,
pretty sure
thank
of
you,
it.
LuAnn. Thank you.
Yes, you are a heck of a lady, I have to tell you.
Thank you. I
And with
want to do so much.
yeah, I just it, it's funny because I knew I liked you the day I met you in that Zoom. And then it was confirmed when you were in the LuAnn live Zoom. And it's just so much more than that, what I imagined or thought. I just thought you were I what I appreciated in you and what I saw in you was I'll say your earnestness and your seriousness, your commitment to what I thought at that point was simply your design education. Right? Like that's what I saw. I'm like, that's a serious one right there. That one's gonna go places. That's what's good. Like I just see I saw that and I tend to see that in somebody, right? But my God, talk about peeling back the onion here.
And you know what's funny also that I've met so many other people, and God, all the stories are different. Like I teach
Yeah.
now, and I have students who are like in the military who are coming back and trying to get their education, and our stories are all unique and we all take a different path to get to where we are. But if we can just like take a moment to like celebrate, the my sister once said something to me really wise. I was going to adult school and I was like, I- I'm in junior college now, and I said, I don't know, but nobody understands me. I will never be able to find a single friend here because no one's gone through what I've gone through. And my sister just looked at me and she says, if you're so focused on the difference, you'll never see the similarities.
Oh, wow.
And it changed my entire career. And no matter where I went from there on, my sister is like this angel on my shoulder. And my sister
Oh,
always said, I always hear her when I start to go down this path where we are so different. There's no way. And I'm like, we're not really that different. I just need to
right.
figure out where we can connect and
Yeah.
build that bridge. So
Right, right. Just like, like the unlikeliness of there you are, this young girl, and that gentleman that's like, here's the newspapers, right?
Yeah.
It's like, in your first moment, it feels like we are nowhere near the same. Like, nope, what are you doing? Like, right? Like, this is scary. I'm on the street. And it didn't matter his color. It's just an older guy,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, it's not, it's just you're a young woman on the street. But here it is. It's like that moment of, no, here's what's the same about us. We're both on the street and it's going to be cold.
Yeah.
And I got newspaper and you need it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. So here's the thing. I say this often, but you know what? I really could talk to you for another 3 hours, but I'm going to, close it out. But I do want to just say, actually ask you, since we've had so few conversations, none on the show, about designers who specialize in affordable housing, in case you hit a nerve with anybody that's like, oh, that feels like me, I would love to get into that. Is it simply a Google search of the companies in the US that specialize in this? Like, how would somebody look into that if everything you said feels like that's what I want to wake up in the morning and do? I want to work in that end of the industry.
I would say the very first step, a lot of these designers show up at those community meetings in your neighborhood.
Ah,
They all show up. They either one
okay.
person who works at some firm or they're an architect who are a client is that's their potential future client and they've attended the event. I think that you should go there and start there. Every community throughout the United States, I truly believe there is some organization in the neighborhood that is raising money or working with different design groups to try to get affordable housing to be built. Um, and then when you get there, figure out who designed it, who's the architect and who's the interior,
Yeah.
and then go and talk to them and say, this is a passion of mine. I mean, I did not go anywhere during that path, but if I were to,
Right,
that's
because if
what I
you're
would
just
do.
starting out, and that's such good advice because of course we can do the other route. Like, oh, I see a sign, that's an affordable housing project. Go up. Let me see who the architect and the design firm is. I didn't even think about that when I asked you, by the way. Hello. And I was like, oh yeah. They usually have that sign outside. But the thing is by going, if this is a passion or Mona has lit the passion, going to the meetings is just more of that passion, of more of that learning and more of that experience, and then coming face to face with the people who are doing it, boots
Mhm.
on the ground, right, that are
Yeah.
doing it. I love it.
I always tell people like I heard this at ASID the year that I had won the portfolio competition, and it was Jennifer was a speaker, and she said something, "Go where you are rare." It was something. It was during her speech, and
Mm,
I thought, when you go to that community meeting, you might be really rare in a sense where there's not many people showing up and wanting to get involved. But more importantly, you're bringing information about the community, the knowledge that you already have of that community, and that can really contribute to the design of that community because there's a lot of designers, the firms that design in communities they don't live in because
mm,
they do affordable housing throughout the United States and maybe they have
mm,
projects. And there's also different architecture firms that do 100% remote. Um, I think interiors we come in a little bit later. We
mm-hmm,
always so aligning ourselves with the firm that do affordable housing and trying to get to the point where we can maybe do a sister, project together where we handle the interiors and then they do the architecture is a great way.
mm-hmm.
I think I'm not at the level to make these introductions or anything, but someday,
Keep her
president.
number because this lady is not done. I'm telling you right now.
And talking about lottery and talking about luck, I think the reason I'm here is because I won that lottery. I listen into your podcast when I can, and
Oh, right, on the,
you were
was it for
premiering
the
your show.
docuseries?
Yes,
Yes.
so I was so excited to watch your docuseries, and I chimed in. I joined in, and I was watching it. And then you announced that, you know, um, you're gonna do a lottery for some gifts, and I was like, oh, I'm in the car, and I was like, I'm just gonna keep listening, and I was so entertained. And then you said my name, or the person who said my name, and I was like, what? And I was like, what?
God. Oh my God. I forgot about that other connection that we had. That was just like, wait a minute. Mona.
And I got a
It's you
care
again,
package.
right?
I got
Yes.
a great care
Yes.
package. And
Oh, that's
yeah.
so right. I remember that now. You got the wellness package
Yes.
of all people.
And I loved it. I just felt like some things are just meant to be, you know. If I hadn't
Ah,
joined that day and if I hadn't won, maybe I wouldn't have come on to the call and talked to you. And who knows, you know?
yeah.
We
Oh my God, that's right. Oh, that's so crazy. I forgot about that. I was making the connection to the virtual LuAnn Live, but I forgot that I was also visualizing the same, coming on the call for that too. I was mixing them in my mind as one event,
yeah. Well,
Well, we were just meant to cross paths. That's really what we're just saying is the point.
we will cross paths again, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it because you are one very special lady. You really are. And
Thank
I'm
you.
so grateful that the podcast brought us together. It's been my honor to understand and know more about you. You are just one heck of an inspiring lady, Mona. You
Oh,
really are.
thank
Thank you.
you. Well, you inspire a whole nation of designers and businesswomen. And you have, you know, what I'm always impressed about is every time when I hear someone who tells me or they've listened to your podcast and they've like tripled their earnings and and I'm always like, what would LuAnn talk to me about? I don't make any money. I don't really bring money to anyone, like I'm just paying student loans and getting by.
Trying to decide if I should take more loans to get a PhD.
I will go into retirement with student loans at this point. But I
They're like
love it.
your shoes and your bags. Like,
And I could never stop, I don't think. I think I will be 80
no, and
years
you
old
shouldn't.
and I will still try to take a class on, history of
Yes.
hip hop or something that I know nothing
And that,
about.
it's funny that you say that because I remember when I was younger, I was at it was an appointment for window treatments at Window Works, and this has got to be going back 25 years ago, and I was in a shop at home appointment with somebody who explained to me that they were an adjunct professor over at Drew University here in Madison, New Jersey. And, and the thing is, I have to say, when you don't have the education, you are always attracted to it. Like there is that part of you, right? And so now I'm very settled in I don't need the actual degree to prove to myself. But at that point, like, I mean, that's only in the last 5 or 6 years. And I'm like, you know what? You can do it. However, it doesn't mean that the desire to learn is gone for sure. Like I'm like, Vinny's always like, what's your bucket list? I'm like, well, we have to walk the Camino. I have to see the pyramids. I have to see Israel. I said, and I have to learn the piano. And I'm going to have to finally learn French all the way. And he's just like, what are you talking about? Right. Like, and that's just like the list off the top of my head. There's 20 other things. But the point was, something came because of course I'm like grilling him on, oh, is it really cool there? You were a teacher there. What is it like? Blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden he told me that when you are a senior citizen, if there is a university in your town, you can audit the classes at no charge. And of course, back then when I've got 4 kids and 90 colleges that we're paying for and that was like, oh my God, no charge. I can do this for free. And so literally in the back of my mind, I'm always like, okay, well, I'm eventually just going to sit in every class in college and just learn it all, like, but not having to do it in the confines of the path of the degree. It's like, oh, I'm interested in marketing. Oh, I'm interested in French. Oh, I'm interested in this. You know what I mean? So I'm with you. I'm with you. You and I will go to classes together when we're old and gray.
I think it's a gift to be able to
Yeah.
learn, and if you go into every endeavor in your life and just see it as a gift or an opportunity, there's so much to learn. Like the class I want to take from you the most is your financing classes.
Oh,
I
so
have
good.
no idea how to do my own financings. It's so hard. You know what?
You got to take them. You got to take the
I
online bookkeeping
I will.
101 and Peter's, the
Hmm.
strategizing your finances. You have to.
You're gonna
I mean,
see me
and the thing
soon.
is, look, it is literally like we're here both big fans of formal education and formal universities and what they bring to us and the amazing people like Ellen and Shannon that they put in front of us and yourself now. But they're not teaching this in the design school.
No.
Like LuAnn University is literally what you don't get there. And Ellen and I went round and around on this one time, and it was on air a little bit on air, and then since then we've talked many times. I love her. I love her. I went to her class one time, right? And I was like, I don't get it. What's the deal? Why can't you? She schooled me. She's like, LuAnn Niagara, sit down and let me tell you what we have to prepare interior designers for in just their profession to get them out the door in 4 years. And to her credit, she said, I'm consistently educating the designers that come through. NICE said, like, you got to do something about the business part. You either got to work for somebody, or you got to take courses on the side, or you got to come back and do our CEUs, and of course I'm like, well, just send them to LuAnn University. Like, we got you covered.
It's great. I hear about how you guys do your finances, and it's such an important part. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
everything we do in our life comes back to finding that balance that we can support ourselves to be able to do what we want to do, right? And
We have to
it's
put our mask on first,
yeah,
right? You got to, that's what I tell the designers. I'm like, you have to be profitable so you can keep bringing your gifts to the rest of us.
yes,
Like, you have to. You can't fizzle out because you just didn't learn how to do your finance. I mean, that's the travesty, right? If you
yeah,
have the desire, the passion, the skills, and the talent, and you just can't sustain it because you don't know that part of it. Like, you can't know everything. You just can't, and that's okay, right? It's just, but knowing you have a gap and not addressing it, that part's not okay, right? That part's
right,
not okay.
right.
So, oh my goodness. Well, I appreciate you so much, Mona. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. And I had only one thought to say. I was thinking about, what I would want to say to students who haven't
Oh, okay. Share,
graduated
please
yet,
share.
because
Good point.
I've only been a few years out, but, you know, take those opportunities. I was very lucky and I worked really hard and I won a few scholarships before I graduated, but I did not win all the things I applied for. I mean, I applied for like over 15 scholarships and I won four. So it means I lost 11, and that, or more, 13 I might have done. I lost a lot. And, but every single time I applied for something else, it made me look deeper into who I was because I had to answer questions or prompts and think about design in a way of like, what am I trying to do with my work and my life? But I also think that if I hadn't applied to any of it, if fear had kept me from applying or fear of rejection or whatever else, I wouldn't have won. And I wouldn't have won on anything that would have given me a platform to have been on a presentation, a Zoom presentation and meet LuAnn. Like every small thing kind of leads to something else. So I guess my point is take it all in. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Just go for it. And rejection from one thing is not a reflection of you. It's for whatever reason you didn't tick the box for that
Right.
moment in that moment of time, and don't let that be something that deters you from going after what you want.
I love that. Many, if they were aware that, in your final senior year or whatever it was, that you won 4 awards, would be like, oh my God. And by the way, oh my God. But I love that you had the vulnerability to share that you applied for 11, right? Was it 11 or 15?
So I
11.
applied for over 15. So
Over
I
15.
so I lost at
Yeah.
least 11. So I
You lost 11, right?
yeah.
But I mean, it's like what is it? I don't know the basketball players. Is it Kobe Johnson or is Michael Jordan, whoever? It's like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Like you miss
Exactly.
100% of the ones that you stand there and say, I shouldn't because fill in. I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. I didn't try. I don't know enough to do whatever the nonsense in your head is. And I love and the perseverance and the fortitude to apply for 15 scholarships, just like right there. Like
A lot.
that's pretty
I have
special.
I have a whole folder structure of like, rejected, rejected, rejected. I think about authors a lot, writers who write and oh my
Right?
God, That
Oh, right.
you gotta have thick skin. Or how many actors? When I was in film school, I remember one of my professors said, my boss saw my wife and thought she was really beautiful and said, I want you to cast the next lead actress in the story. Like, write it like it's your wife. And then he came to the casting day and he just kind of like thought about his wife and created the mystery around the character based on his wife's looks and everything. And he said he came to the casting day and he saw like 15 women that looked like his wife. And he said, my wife's a beautiful, wonderful woman. And this room had 15 women that could be her sister. And and he said that the competition sometimes it's those little boxes that you tick.
Yeah.
It's the rejection is real in every industry, and
Yes.
so we just got to be strong and persevere.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, amen on that one. I mean, for you, you're the epitome of that, girl.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for talking to
This has
me.
been awesome. This has been awesome. And if we're not careful, we're going to stop and start again. Again. So I'm gonna... Oh, thank you, sweetie. I appreciate you.
I hope I get to see you in person soon.
Me too.
Wow. What a very special lady. There's so much to talk about here, but I want to start with something that Mona said at the end. She was speaking to current interior design students, but I would, say we're all students, aren't we? And she said, take those opportunities. She used that word earlier in our conversation when she was explaining what it's like to live on the streets of LA, homeless as a teenager. She said she saw people as either with or without opportunities. And she herself, she had to work really, really hard to create opportunities for herself. It started with finding a safe place to sleep, and then a shower, and then a job frying chicken of all things. But the ball kept rolling, and she has created amazing opportunities time and time again. But her message is, take those opportunities. It's actually incredible to think about how she could even notice opportunities, let alone seize them. She was 16 and all alone. But she found kindness from strangers, from the man that gave her newspapers to keep warm, from the family that fed her and gave her a place to sleep, from the restaurant owner on the other end of the phone, willing to listen to her story long enough to realize that, guess what? Maybe he did know her mother. Those are the impactful parts of Mona's story, and ultimately a big part of why, and I think how she ended up in interior design. She wanted to be impactful too, but she didn't know she would be where she is now. She was running from that at first, right? But like she said, it found her. After hearing Mona speak about affordable housing, it was eye-opening, right? How you can create welcoming, dignified spaces for vulnerable community members, seniors, veterans, formerly homeless individuals. Many of these residents have disabilities or face stigma around poverty and housing insecurity. Thoughtfully designed spaces are a luxury. We say it all the time. Do we hear it? Do we hear the difference when we're talking about, will you pay my rates? It's a luxury service. And thinking about this now, right? These are people who just need a roof over their heads. They need a working fridge or hot water. That's their luxury, which is why Mona's job is so important. She's there to ask the questions, to make sure the materials are safe and that the building is healthy. Now, we've done a few other shows on sustainable design and wellness design if you're interested in these niches. We'll link these and a couple of others in the notes, but be sure to check out episode 569 with Mike Peterson on design's influence on health and wellness, and also episode 809 with Michelle Rohr-Lauer on eco-friendly design. And in case you're wondering, good for the planet happens to be good for the people too, and can also be good for your profits, right? Now, by designing with sustainability and wellness in mind, these people, these families can find the stability that they need and find the hope to start rebuilding. What an impactful area for you as an interior designer to work in. And how do you get started in it? Relationships, like so many other things in business, it boils down to relationships. Mona said, go to the community meetings, find out about the affordable housing projects in your area, meet the architects working on these projects. I love that Mona said, go where you are rare. This was advice given to her, and I think we can all use it. We find those places where our gifts and our talents are rare and needed, and then build the relationships and create the opportunities. And you know what else? You leave the ego at the door, right? I appreciate how Mona discussed breaking assumptions we or neighbors may hold around affordable housing. It's a basic necessity, and we cannot allow ourselves to take it for granted. By designing these spaces, Mona is really designing a plan out of these spaces. She's designing a plan enabling the residents to establish like some stability so that through having a home, being able to eat, sleep, shower, they then can move on to finding a secure job, to saving money, and eventually transition out of housing assistance. All right? We may think we have nothing in common with someone living on the streets, but Mona compels us to build bridges of empathy and understanding. I also want to say how grateful I am that Shannon Leddy of New York School of Interior Design introduced me to Mona. Shannon was on the show way back in the beginning, episodes 3 and 29, if you want to listen. There are many paths to career in interior design, and Shannon is an absolutely educator among educators. If you have ever had the privilege and the opportunity to be taught by Shannon and you are listening to this show, I encourage you in the Instagram post for the show to give her a high five, a shout out, and to let me know. All right. Now, and if this conversation moved you, I encourage you to reach out to firms in your area that design affordable housing spaces. See if you can volunteer on projects to gain experience. Attend the community meetings about the plan developments to learn perspectives from all stakeholders. It's a Google search away. By uplifting those without homes today, we strengthen the nets of support and create spaces for human dignity, compassion, and new beginnings along the way and into the future. Mona, you are something else. Your work is such a gift, and you are so incredibly inspiring. I'm so glad that this podcast connected you and me together. Thanks for joining me today and sharing your story with us. And thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed learning about Mona. Decide to be excellent. Thank you for joining me today. This podcast is a production of LuAnn Niagara, Inc. If you want to know more about me, my books, or LuAnn University, go to LuAnnNiagara.com. And if you are interested in having WindowWorks help you with your next window treatment or awning project in the New York, New Jersey metro area, go to WindowWorksNJ.com to learn more. Have an excellent day.